Thank you so much for all your incredible love and support. If you enjoyed this story and want to experience more spine-chilling tales, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a frightful new video. I was so excited for my beach vacation. After months of stress at work, I desperately needed a break. I found this amazing all-inclusive deal online. It seemed perfect. White sand beaches, tropical drinks, the works. I booked it right away. The flight was long but uneventful. When I landed, a driver was waiting to take me to the resort. As we drove, the scenery got more and more remote. No beaches in sight, just empty roads and overgrown fields. After about an hour, we pulled up to this old run-down hotel. It looked nothing like the pictures online. The paint was peeling, windows were boarded up, my heart sank. This couldn't be right. The driver dropped my bags and sped off before I could say anything. I stood there stunned for a moment, then hesitantly went inside. The lobby was dark and dusty. No one was at the front desk. I called out, but no one answered. After a few minutes, a surly-looking man appeared. He barely looked at me as he handed over a room key. When I tried to ask questions, he just grunted and walked away. Confused and uneasy, I went to find my room. The hallways were dimly lit and eerily quiet. My room was basic and shabby, nothing like the luxury suite I'd been promised. And of course, no ocean view. I tried calling the front desk, but the phone was dead. No cell service either. I was starting to panic a little. What was going on? Where was everyone? I decided to look around, hoping to find other guests or staff who could explain. But as I wandered the empty halls and abandoned common areas, I saw no one. The whole place felt frozen in time, like it hadn't been used in years. In what was supposed to be the dining room, I found a stack of old newspapers. The headlines made my blood run cold. Hotel massacre shocks nation. 22 dead in grisly killing spree. The articles described how a former employee had gone on a murderous rampage, killing guests and staff before taking his own life. The dates on the papers were from over a decade ago. My mind was reeling. Why was I here? Who had lured me to this place? I raced back to my room, heart pounding. I had to get out of here. But when I tried the door, it was locked. The key wouldn't work. I was trapped. Panic rising, I pounded on the walls and screamed for help. But the empty halls just echoed back at me. As night fell, the shadows in my room seemed to move. Every creak and groan of the old building made me jump. I huddled on the bed, too terrified to sleep. In the murky pre-dawn light, I thought I saw a figure standing in the corner of my room. I blinked and it was gone. Was my mind playing tricks on me, or was something sinister lurking in the shadows? I spent the next day desperately searching for a way out. I tried breaking the windows, but they were covered with metal bars. I looked for fire escapes, but all the exits were chained shut. By the third day, I was weak from hunger and wild with fear. I'd seen no one since that first night, but I constantly felt like I was being watched. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye. Whispers and footsteps echoed through the walls. I don't know how much longer I can last here. My only hope is that someone will realize I'm missing and come looking for me. But a horrible part of me wonders if that's what whoever trapped me here is counting on. Are they waiting for someone else to show up to add to their twisted collection of victims? I'm writing this all down in case I don't make it out of here. If anyone finds this, please, don't let what happened to me happen to anyone else. Shut this place down for good. And whatever you do, don't trust vacation deals that seem too good to be true. You never know where you might end up. It's getting dark again now. The shadows are starting to creep across the floor. I swear I can hear breathing coming from the closet. I don't want to look. I'm so tired, but I'm afraid to close my eyes. What will be waiting for me if I do? I keep thinking about that day I booked this trip. How excited I was, how much I was looking forward to relaxing on the beach. Now that feels like a dream from another lifetime. Will I ever see the ocean again? Feel the sun on my face? All I wanted was a nice vacation. Instead, I found myself trapped in a nightmare. The walls feel like they're closing in. The air is thick and oppressive. I'm not sure how much longer I can hold on to my sanity. I've lost track of how long I've been here now. Days, weeks, it all blurs together. The quiet is deafening. Sometimes I sing or talk to myself just to break the silence. I've searched every inch of this place for a way out. Nothing. It's like the whole building is one giant trap, designed to lure people in and never let them leave. Who's behind all this? What do they want? Are they watching me right now, laughing at my fear and desperation? The not knowing is almost worse than anything else. I try to stay hopeful, to believe that I'll find a way out of here. But with each passing hour, that hope fades a little more. Will I die here, alone in this awful place? Will anyone ever know what happened to me? I'm so tired. So very tired. Maybe I'll just rest my eyes for a moment. But what if I never wake up? What if? As I scribbled my final thoughts, the oppressive darkness of the room seemed to thicken around me. The air grew colder, and the faint whispers I'd been hearing for days swelled into a chorus of unintelligible murmurs. My eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion, but the terror of what might come if I succumbed to sleep kept me clinging to consciousness. But eventually the overwhelming fatigue became too much. My body, drained and broken, gave in, and I slipped into a restless sleep, my hands still gripping the pen. My dreams were filled with distorted faces and shadowy figures, all laughing, all whispering my name. When I awoke, the room was pitch black, save for a sliver of light coming from under the door. My heart raced as I realized I wasn't alone. A soft, deliberate shuffling came from the closet, the same closet I had been too terrified to check before. I could hear faint breathing, growing louder as whatever was inside drew closer to the door. Summoning the last of my strength, I bolted from the bed, intending to make one final attempt to escape. But as my feet hit the floor, the door to the closet creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but darkness within. I froze, paralyzed by fear. Slowly a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. His voice was calm, almost soothing, as he spoke. "You've been such a wonderful guest," the figure said, his tone mocking. "But the fun is only just beginning." I backed away, my eyes darting around the room, searching for any means of escape. But the door to my room was now wide open, revealing the dark hallway beyond. The figure advanced slowly, savoring the terror in my eyes. "You see," the figure continued, "this place feeds on fear, on despair. The more you struggle, the more it consumes you." Desperation overtook me, and I lunged toward the door, but as soon as I stepped into the hallway, I found myself back in the same room, the door slamming shut behind me. The figure stood there, grinning wider. "There's no escape," the figure whispered. "Not for you, not for anyone." My screams echoed through the halls, but they were swallowed by the darkness, absorbed into the very walls of the cursed hotel. And then there was silence once more. Days later, when a new guest arrived at the old hotel, they found the lobby just as deserted, the front desk just as empty. But in one of the rooms tucked under a bed, they discovered a crumpled piece of paper filled with frantic handwriting. No one ever saw that guest again. I never thought our summer road trip would turn into a nightmare. It was supposed to be a fun family getaway, just me, my wife, and our 2 kids. We'd been driving for hours, taking back roads to avoid traffic, when we spotted a quaint little village nestled in a valley. The place wasn't on our map, but it looked so charming we decided to stop and explore. As we drove in, I noticed how quiet it was. No people walking around, no cars, not even any animals. But everything looked perfect, like a movie set. The houses were all neatly painted, gardens well tended, not a single piece of trash anywhere. We parked near the village square and got out to stretch our legs. The kids were excited to run around after being cooped up in the car. My wife and I walked hand in hand, admiring the picturesque buildings. But something felt off. Where was everyone? I peeked in a few windows as we walked by. Inside, I saw tables set for meals, open books on side tables, even a TV left on. It was as if everyone had just vanished in the middle of their day. A chill ran down my spine. As the sun started to set, I suggested we head back to the car and find a real town to stay the night. But when we got there, the engine wouldn't start. No matter what I tried, it wouldn't turn over. We were stuck. With no other choice, we picked an empty house to stay in for the night. I felt bad about breaking in, but we needed shelter. Inside was just as eerily perfect as the outside. Fresh food in the fridge, clean sheets on the beds. We ate a quick dinner from the pantry and tried to settle in. That's when things got weird. As darkness fell, I started hearing noises. At first, I thought it was just the old house creaking, but then I clearly heard voices, whispers, laughter, even what sounded like crying. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The kids were scared, huddled together in one bed. My wife tried to calm them, but I could see the fear in her eyes too. I kept watch by the window, peering out into the dark streets. That's when I saw them, shadows moving between the houses. Sometimes they looked almost human, other times they were just wisps of darkness. I don't know how we made it through that night. None of us slept. When dawn finally broke, I was ready to grab the family and just start walking out of town. But as I looked out the window, I saw an old man standing in the street staring right at me. He beckoned for me to come outside. Against my better judgment, I did. He told me the village's story, how a tragedy long ago had cursed the place, trapping the souls of all who lived there. They were doomed to relive their last day over and over, invisible to the living world. But sometimes, unwary travelers like us could slip in, seeing the village as it once was. The old man said we had until sunset to break the curse, or we'd be trapped here too, becoming part of the endless cycle. He gave us a task. We had to find an old locket hidden somewhere in the village and return it to its rightful owner's grave. What followed was the most stressful day of my life. We searched every house, every building in the village, while ghostly figures flickered at the edge of our vision. The kids were terrified, but they helped search too. My wife kept us focused, reminding us what was at stake. With less than an hour until sunset, we finally found the locket, tucked away in a hidden compartment in the church. We raced to the graveyard, the shadows growing longer by the minute. Just as the sun touched the horizon, we found the right grave and placed the locket on it. There was a moment of absolute silence, then a sound like a long collective sigh. The air shimmered, and suddenly the village was full of people, real, solid people. They looked confused, as if waking from a long dream. Some of them started crying when they realized they were free. We slipped away in the commotion, not wanting to try explaining our role in all this. Amazingly, our car started on the first try. As we drove away, I looked back at the village. It looked different now, older, a bit run down, but alive. We never told anyone what really happened that day. Who would believe us? Sometimes I wonder if it was all just a shared hallucination brought on by exhaustion and an overactive imagination. But then I'll catch a glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of my eye, or hear a whisper on the wind, and I know it was real. That vacation taught me to stick to the main roads and well-known destinations. There are some places that aren't meant to be found, some stories that aren't meant to be uncovered. But I'm grateful we were able to help those trapped souls find peace. And I'm even more grateful we made it out in time. I don't think I could have handled an eternity in that abandoned village. I never thought a simple backpacking trip would turn into a nightmare. My best friend Jake and I had been planning this adventure for months, 2 weeks exploring the rugged countryside of a small Eastern European country. We were both recent college grads looking for one last hurrah before starting our careers. The first few days went perfectly. We hiked through stunning mountain landscapes, camped under the stars, and bonded over cheap local beer in tiny villages. It was everything we'd hoped for. On day 5, we decided to go off the main trail and explore a more remote area. Our guidebook mentioned an isolated village tucked away in a valley that was supposed to have incredible views. We figured it would be a cool detour. After a long day of hiking, we finally spotted the village in the distance as the sun was setting. It was a collection of old stone buildings with red tile roofs perched on a hillside overlooking lush green farmland. Smoke curled from chimneys and we could see people moving about. It looked quaint and picturesque. As we approached, a group of villagers came out to greet us. They seemed excited to see visitors and ushered us into the town square. An older man who appeared to be the village elder welcomed us warmly. He insisted we join them for dinner and stay the night. We were exhausted from hiking all day, so we gratefully accepted. That first evening was lovely. The villagers prepared a feast of hearty local dishes and toasted us with homemade plum brandy. They asked us many questions about where we were from and our travels. Everyone was so friendly and hospitable. Jake and I went to sleep that night feeling lucky to have stumbled upon such a wonderful place. The next morning, things started to feel off. The warmth from the previous night was gone. Villagers avoided eye contact and hurried past us. When we tried to ask about hiking trails in the area, we got curt, evasive responses. The whole atmosphere had shifted, and I felt deeply unsettled. Jake suggested we thank the villagers for their hospitality and continue on our way. But when we tried to leave, we were told the only road out of the valley was closed due to a landslide. They said we'd have to stay a few more days until it was cleared. I knew something wasn't right. That road had been perfectly fine when we arrived. Were they lying to keep us here? But why? Over the next 2 days, the villagers' behavior got increasingly strange and menacing. They watched us constantly. We weren't allowed to wander outside the village. Our backpacks and phones mysteriously disappeared from our room. When we demanded answers, we were met with icy stares and mumbled excuses. On the third night, I woke to find Jake missing from our room. Panicked, I ran outside calling his name. In the dim moonlight, I saw a group of villagers dragging something towards a barn on the edge of town. With a sickening jolt, I realized it was Jake's limp body. Heart pounding, I crept after them and peered through a crack in the barn door. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. Jake was tied up on some kind of stone altar. The villagers were dressed in robes, chanting in a language I didn't understand. The elder raised a gleaming knife above Jake. I realized with horror that they were about to sacrifice him in some kind of ritual. Memories flashed through my mind, the villagers asking about our families, if anyone was expecting us. They had deliberately lured us here for this. Forcing down my terror, I knew I had to act fast to save Jake. I sprinted back to the village and set fire to several hay bales near the houses. As the flames spread, I heard shouts of alarm. The villagers came running from the barn to fight the fire. In the chaos, I slipped into the barn and cut Jake free. He was groggy from some kind of drug but able to walk. Supporting him, we stumbled out into the night. We pushed our exhausted bodies onward, putting as much distance between us and that nightmare village as we could before dawn. We eventually found a main road and flagged down a passing truck. The kindly driver took us to the nearest city where we immediately went to the police. But when authorities went to investigate, they found the village abandoned. It was like the entire population had vanished overnight. To this day, I'm not sure anyone believes our wild story. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing. But then I look at the scars on Jake's wrists from the ropes, and I know it was real. I still love to travel and explore new places. But now I'm much more cautious about venturing off the beaten path. You never know what dark secrets might be hiding in those remote corners of the world. Our curiosity almost cost us our lives. Some places are isolated for a reason, and sometimes it's best to leave them that way. My 4 best friends and I decided to splurge on a week-long stay at the Sunset Paradise Resort. We'd been saving up for months, excited about the prospect of white sandy beaches, crystal clear waters, and endless cocktails. As soon as we arrived, we were blown away by the resort's beauty. The lobby was enormous, with high ceilings and tropical plants everywhere. The staff greeted us with warm smiles and cool drinks. Our rooms were spacious and luxurious, with balconies overlooking the ocean. It felt like we'd stepped into paradise. The first few days were amazing. We spent our time lounging by the pool, trying out water sports, and indulging in the all-you-can-eat buffets. The resort had everything we could want: multiple restaurants, a spa, nightly entertainment, and even a small casino. We kept joking about how we never wanted to leave, but then things started to get weird. On the third day, I noticed that the resort seemed less crowded than before. At first I thought maybe it was just my imagination, but then Sarah mentioned that she hadn't seen that nice elderly couple we'd met at dinner the night before. We figured they must have checked out early. The next day, even more people seemed to be missing. The pool area, which had been packed just yesterday, was now half empty. When we asked one of the staff members about it, they just smiled and said it was normal for guests to come and go throughout the week. Something didn't feel right, though. I started paying more attention to the other guests, trying to keep track of familiar faces. That's when I realized people weren't just leaving, they were vanishing. One minute you'd see someone at the bar, and the next they were gone, their drink still sitting there untouched. My friends thought I was being paranoid at first, but soon they started noticing it too. We decided to do some digging. Late one night, we snuck into the resort's tiny library and started researching the history of the island. What we found chilled us to the bone. Apparently, the resort had been built on an ancient burial ground. The local tribe had protested its construction, warning of a curse, but they'd been ignored. Since then, there had been reports of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances, but nothing concrete enough to raise alarms. As we read this, the lights in the library suddenly flickered. I swear I felt a cold breeze brush past me, even though all the windows were closed. We all looked at each other, freaked out, and decided to head back to our rooms. The next morning, Emily was gone. Her bed hadn't been slept in, and all her things were still there. We panicked and went to the front desk, but the staff just gave us those same eerie smiles and insisted Emily must have gone for an early morning walk. We knew better. We'd seen the pattern by now, people disappearing without a trace, the staff acting like nothing was wrong. We were trapped in a real-life horror movie, and we needed to find a way out. We spent the next day trying to figure out how to appease the angry spirits. We scoured the island for any information we could find about the tribe's customs and beliefs. Finally, we found an old shopkeeper in the nearby village who told us about a ritual that might help. That night, we snuck out to the beach with the items we needed for the ritual. As we started the ceremony, the wind picked up, and I swear I could hear whispers in the air. We persisted, our hearts racing, hoping against hope that this would work. Suddenly everything went quiet. The air felt different, lighter somehow. We looked at each other, wondering if it had worked. Then we heard a sound that made our blood run cold, screams coming from the resort. We raced back, only to find chaos. Guests were running everywhere, panicked and confused. Many of them seemed to have no idea how they'd gotten there or how long they'd been at the resort. Among the crowd, we spotted Emily, looking dazed but alive. In all the commotion, we managed to grab our things and make a break for it. We didn't stop running until we reached the small airport on the other side of the island. We were lucky to get on the first flight out, not caring where it was going as long as it was away from that cursed resort. It's been a few weeks since we got back home, and I'm still having nightmares about what happened. We've tried to report the resort to the authorities, but no one believes us. When we look online, we can't even find any evidence that the Sunset Paradise Resort ever existed. Sometimes I wonder if it was all just a collective hallucination. But then I'll catch a glimpse of the terror in my friend's eyes when someone mentions tropical vacations, and I know it was real. We may have escaped, but I can't help wondering about all the others who disappeared. Are they trapped there forever? Or did our ritual somehow set them free? One thing's for sure, I'm never going to an all-inclusive resort again. Some paradises are just too good to be true. We were so excited for our mountain getaway. The cabin looked perfect online, rustic, isolated, surrounded by wilderness. Just what we needed to unplug and relax. The drive up was gorgeous, winding through dense forest. As we climbed higher, my phone lost service. I didn't mind. That was part of the appeal. We found the turnoff and bumped down a narrow dirt road to the cabin. It was even better in person. A cozy log structure nestled in a clearing with a wraparound porch and rocking chairs. Inside was all knotty pine and plaid, with a stone fireplace. We unpacked and settled in, breathing in the crisp mountain air. That first day was idyllic. We hiked, grilled out on the deck, watched the sunset. As night fell, we curled up by the fire with books and wine. Perfect peace and quiet, until the noises started. At first I thought it was just normal forest sounds, branches creaking, animals rustling. But then came eerie howls and shrieks unlike anything I'd heard before. They seemed to be coming from all around us in the darkness. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just coyotes or something. But a chill ran down my spine. Those sounds didn't seem quite natural. The next morning, things felt off. The air was heavy, like we were being watched. As we made coffee, I noticed deep gouges in the wooden walls outside. They looked like claw marks, but massive, much too big for a bear. My husband found something on the porch, a crude figure made of twigs and bone, lashed together with sinew. We brought it inside to examine it. That's when we realized it was still wet with blood. Thoroughly creeped out, we decided to cut our trip short. But when we went to leave, the car wouldn't start. The battery was completely drained, despite being fine yesterday. We were stuck there, at least for now. No phone, no transportation, completely cut off. As day faded to dusk, the sounds in the forest grew louder. Closer. No longer just howls, but guttural snarls and high-pitched screams. Shadows flitted between the trees at the edge of the clearing. We huddled inside, doors locked, as night fell. The noises were all around us now, scraping and scratching at the walls, thudding on the roof, heavy breathing just outside the windows. I caught glimpses of pale, twisted faces peering in at us. Not quite human, their eyes gleamed in the darkness. We stayed awake all night, huddled together. As dawn broke, everything went silent. We ventured out cautiously. The clearing was full of crude totems like the one we'd found before, dozens of them, surrounding the cabin. A warning, or a threat. We knew we had to get out of there, and fast. We gathered supplies and set off down the road on foot, hoping to find help. The woods felt oppressive, closing in around us. Every snapping twig made us jump. After what felt like hours, we finally reached the main road. To our relief, a park ranger truck was parked there. The ranger looked alarmed when he saw us, and our wild story tumbled out. His face grew grave as we spoke. He'd heard similar accounts before. Stories of feral people living deep in the mountains, cut off from civilization for generations, hunting and killing anyone who ventured into their territory. Most dismissed them as urban legends. But he'd seen things that made him wonder. He drove us to the nearest town and we went straight to the police. They were skeptical but took our statement. said they'd sent someone to check it out. We got a hotel room and tried to relax, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, I jolted awake to scratching at the window. A pale face peered in, lips peeled back in a snarl. I screamed, and it vanished. The next day, police said they'd found nothing at the cabin, no sign of intruders or anything amiss. Just our car with a dead battery. They suggested maybe we'd gotten spooked by normal wildlife and let our imaginations run wild. But we know what we saw, what we heard. The rangers and locals whisper about those creatures, how they stalk the deep woods hunting trespassers, how they can never be truly caught or stopped. We're back home now, trying to move on, but I still have nightmares about those inhuman faces in the darkness, the unearthly shrieks echoing through the trees. I know they're still out there, waiting, watching, and I'll never set foot in those mountains again.